got a problem with your team now.
Your quarterback literally has to play a perfect game every time because, first of all, your defense is not really going to be able to stop anybody.
Right.
Now, you turn the ball over, you give them, you should be crying. Sorry.
We gonna be all right.
No, y'all ain't.
The owner of the Cincinnati Bengals, Mike Brown, is cheap, notoriously. This is a situation that he's never been in with this type of talent this early in their careers, with this salary cap at this point in the NFL, where you are going to have to pay wide receivers $40+ million.
The 2024 Cincinnati Bengals had everything. Joe Burrow led the league in passing yards and touchdowns, Ja'Marr Chase secured the receiving triple crown, and Trey Hendrickson topped the NFL in sacks. It was a holy trinity of excellence. Yet, somehow it amounted only into another 9-8 season, a third-place AFC North finish, and no playoff football. Now the Bengals, they're staring at Chase, Higgins, and Hendrickson all seeking new deals in a defense that is full of holes, and the Bengals are in a defining offseason for their future. And in today's video, we're gonna look at the moves that they have to make if they wanna secure their future and make sure that they can continue to be a contending franchise, or how they're gonna keep wasting their elite quarterback in Joe Burrow. Because this is the scary truth about the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow. Now, in 2024, Joe Burrow was, simply put, just sensational. His career-high 4,918 yards and 43 touchdowns would have been undoubtedly good enough to win the MVP award if the team around him wasn't so disappointing. Most specifically, though, the defense. While Burrow was leading his offense to the 6th most points in the NFL during the 2024 season, at an average of 27.8 per game, the Bengals defense crumbled to give up the 7th most in the league. This dismal defensive output was enough to resign the Bengals to an underwhelming 9-8 record and get their previously highly regarded defensive coordinator fired. So really, if we look at this Bengals team from the outside, we have a generational quarterback, pretty much just a generational offense when you think of Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, and Tee Higgins. When all three of those guys are on the field, they are just absolutely unstoppable and one of the best defenses in the league. And then you flip to the other side of the ball and you have a dismal defense outside of Trey Hendrickson. How do you have all of that and at the same time have nothing? Well, we're going to go over that, especially on the defensive side of the ball right now. Now, for starters, thankfully the Bengals do at least have $46.5 million worth of cap space, which is the 9th most in the NFL, and they can create plenty of more by shedding some underwhelming performances by veteran talent from this season. They're gonna have to shed names like Sheldon Rankins, Geno Stone, Sam Hubbard even, and maybe Alex Kappa, among others, could all be on their way out. Joe Burrow has also even gone on record saying he would restructure his contract to help the Bengals front office to keep all of his fellow stars in town. So after hearing that, I think it's safe to say that Bengals fans, don't worry, because there still is a chance that you guys have a contender window right now. Priority number one, of course, needs to be signing star wide receiver Ja'Marr Chase. The Bengals were close to getting this deal done prior to the 2024 season, but didn't quite get it across the line, with Chase even holding out during the team's training camp. This came back to bite the Bengals when Chase started the season slowly, managing just 97 yards from his first 2 games combined, which were both losses. But that is okay, because Chase has admitted that this holdout was a contributing factor to his slow early performances in the season. He then did manage to rebound in style, going on to collect the triple crown as the NFL's leader in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns, meaning he is even more worthy of his extension this time around and probably even more expensive now. Truthfully, I think they're going to want to get this deal done as soon as possible, so that way, again, they can stop with these slow starts they have at the beginning of every single season when Joe Burrow has been quarterback. So if they can kind of make this a priority, they can focus on other spots that they need to focus on as well. And when we're talking about the slow starts too, you could even account the one from 2024 this past year to also being the fact that they were missing Tee Higgins as well. As we all do know, a hamstring injury did prevent him from participating in the Bengals' incredibly damaging loss to both New England and Kansas City, which has been an unfortunately all too familiar part of Higgins' career so far in Cincinnati. Higgins has been a mold of consistency and quality when on the field, posting 2 2 1,000-yard seasons and 2 more with over 900 yards. However, the only thing going against him is that he has missed 10 games over the last 2 seasons due to injury, which kind of complicates the decision-making progress when figuring out whether to pay the young stud. I mean, Joe Burrow has even gone on record of saying that he really does want the Bengals to pay Tee Higgins and make sure that he stays in town. Like, I mean, in the 5 games that Higgins missed in 2024, the Bengals had a 1-4 record, including an embarrassing loss to a 4-win Patriots team in week 1 and a 1-point loss to the Kansas City Chiefs in week 2. Higgins did return in week 3, which also came in a loss, but his presence at least did help Joe Burrow record his first 300-yard, 3-touchdown outing of the season, while also freeing up space for Jamar Chase to have his first game with over 100 yards on the year. And I mean, look, truthfully, when you have all 3 of those guys on the field, they're probably one of the toughest offenses to stop in the league. I mean, just trying to guard Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase is already so much for a defense to have to handle, and most teams can't handle. With that being said, like, I mean, Jamar Chase, as we all know, is just a certified just freak when he's on the field. But I mean, on top of that too, he might even be the most unguardable wide receiver in the NFL, opposite of maybe Jamar Chase. I mean, Justin Jefferson, maybe you could argue that. But again, when you have both of these guys on the field, if you double Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins is going to be one-on-one with somebody. And then if you double Tee Higgins, you're leaving probably the best wide receiver in the league one-on-one. So really, there's no way you're going to be able to guard both of these receivers when they're on the field. Like, I mean, despite playing in only 12 games, Higgins still managed to post 911 yards and a career-high 10 touchdowns in 2024. Twice he passed the 130-yard mark, including a stunning 131-yard, 3-touchdown performance in an overtime win against Denver. It's games like these that remind you that Tee Higgins isn't your typical wide receiver too. He's an absolute matchup nightmare in his own right, and the strategic advantage of having defenses worry about him and Chase, along with Joe Burrow's arm, is the Cincinnati Bengals superpower and is what keeps them as contenders every single year. Like, I mean, like I've kind of said like 4 times this video, keeping all 3 of these guys in town is going to be a major key, and also is what makes sure that just keeps Cincinnati competitive and keeps them scoring points in every single game when all 3 of those guys are on the field. And now, I mean, I think they might have been leaning more towards the franchise tag if they haven't already franchise tagged him up to this point. I think they're going to try and hope that they franchise tag him and will play him. But I mean, when you have a guy like Joe Burrow, who is already, as we saw this past season, has very good chemistry with Jamar Chase, why wouldn't you want to build that chemistry and add in Tee Higgins as well, when he's probably one of the top 5, if not, you could say even top 3, if not the best wide receiver 2 in the league when you pair him with Jamar Chase. Like, I mean, when you have one of the best quarterbacks in the league, he kind of deserves the best wide receivers in the league as well to make sure that he can perform at his best as well. And I mean, yes, it is definitely going to be tough to try and sign Tee Higgins this offseason, especially when you consider the $46 million that Joe Burrow's contract is going to take up. But again, Burrow has said he's willing to move those numbers around to make it work. And again, I mean, why would you want to let Tee Higgins walk? Like, he's a top 15, 20 receiver in the NFL. Like, he's going to be a wide receiver 1 wherever else he goes. So there makes no sense in letting him walk this offseason. And the one thing that I keep hearing, and I even saw, I think it was The Athletic post an article about, is like the dream scenarios for the Bengals to franchise tag Tee Higgins and then pretty much just tag and trade him is what it would be, and trade him to like the Ravens or something, which again, if he goes to the Ravens, he's going to be their number 1 guy there. And again, yes, I'm sure you would get a plethora of picks for Tee Higgins, but it just doesn't make any sense because now you're adding even more pressure onto Joe Burrow to make the offense work with one less superstar wide receiver. I mean, they showed that they could do it this past year. I mean, they've done it the past couple of years, but if you can just make it easier on Joe Burrow, why wouldn't you? Not only that too, but then we have to think that draft picks, they're not really guaranteed to all be hits either if they do trade for a plethora of picks. Like, I mean, we don't have to look far to see how wide receivers have panned out for the Bengals that have gone later in the round, such as Jermaine Burton, I think is his name, or it was Jermaine, I'm looking at my notes. Jermaine Burton, who was a 3rd rounder. He didn't do anything in 2024 and was drafted in the 3rd round. Like, again, they're not all going to be hits. And I know that this wide receiver class is fairly stacked, but it's still going to be hard. Besides like the McMillans and the Burtons that are coming out early in the draft, we don't really know how the rest of these guys are going to pan out when they're in the league. And I get it. Yes, we all want to plan for the future, and I get it. Yes, Bengal fans want to have future success as well. But when you have a guy like Joe Burrow, who is already just here right now, his window to win a Super Bowl is right now. You got to put guys around him so that way they can win right now, like Tee Higgins. To emphasize this point too, in 2024, the Cincinnati Bengals were tied for the second fewest number of rush attempts with 380. And as you would expect, this correlated to the second most pass attempts with 652. Similarly, 67.3% of the Cincinnati Bengals first downs came on passing plays, which was the second most in the NFL. In contrast, the bottom three were made up of the Philadelphia Eagles, Buffalo Bills, and Baltimore Ravens, who all passed for first downs on 49% or under of their plays. Considering how well Joe Burrow has played in 2024, you can't really blame Cincinnati for setting their offense up this way, but it really does emphasize that they're a pass-first unit, which therefore, if you want to be a pass-first unit, then you're going to have to keep the band together and pay Tee Higgins as well as Jamar Chase, which is absolutely essential. The most obvious argument against paying up to keep Higgins in the building is that there are glaring needs elsewhere on the roster, in particular on the defensive side of the ball. Are you looking for a new book this football season? BetUS is the answer. They have the fastest and easiest payouts in the industry, along with 24/7 personalized service, 365 days a year. Not only that, but they have live wagering on all major games, so if you see something mid-game and want to make a wager on it, you can. And the best part is you get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. And now look, you guys knew I had to come through with you guys for a promo code. So make sure that you guys are using code YouTube150 for a nice 150% deposit bonus on up to $2,000. That's right. We were doing 125%, but we said, screw that. We're giving you guys 150% instead. Again, that is promo code YouTube150 for a 150% deposit bonus on up to $2,000. Again, thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video, but for now, let's hop back into it. With Joe Burrow playing at the peak of his powers, Jamar Chase delivering arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL, and Chase Brown looking promising at running back, it is fair to make the point that Tee Higgins as a wide receiver is more of a luxury item and that the money could be spent elsewhere. For example, star defensive end Trey Hendrickson, who is coming off of his second consecutive season with 17.5 sacks, at 30 years old and in need of a new contract, you could argue that his value will never be higher and that a trade is the most sensible option. However, replacing his production would be nearly impossible. A free agent market featuring Khalil Mack, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, or Chase Young on a cheaper deal could tempt Cincinnati for sure, but none could replace Hendrickson's impact over the next 2 seasons. Even with Hendrickson playing at a defensive player of the year level, the Bengals still give up the 7th most points and produce the 8th fewest sacks. I think if they let him go, it would essentially just guarantee a further defensive decline, making the playoffs look even harder to reach in 2025. I really do think the best thing for the Cincinnati defense to put them in a position to win now is to give Hendrickson the money that he deserves and dip into a loaded defensive line class in the 2025 draft to build around him on defense. Simply put, the Bengals have got to improve on that side of the ball if they are to have any hope of maximizing their chances to win in the immediate future, and keeping Hendrickson around will be key to that. And now, yes, I'm sure some of you in the comments will be like, well, yeah, you want to side Tee Higgins and Trey Hendrickson. Well, what about Joe Burrow's $46.5 million cap hit? And then you have to sign Jamar Chase too. And yes, for a franchise that hasn't been known for paying their star players, well, I think they're going to definitely pay Jamar Chase what he deserves, because they're not going to let the best wide receiver in the NFL just walk out their doors without a doubt. The dude's going to get paid. When do we know that? We're not sure. It's going to be more than Justin Jefferson got last year, which they should have just paid him right before Justin Jefferson or even right after, because now it's going to be even more expensive, but that's a whole different conversation. Nonetheless, though, they're going to pay these guys the money that they deserve, because they are superstars and they need them to be competitive in this division and just in the league in its entirety. But even going back to how they've not wanted to pay their stars big money, we don't really have to look that far back to just last season when they let Jesse Bates walk in 2023, watching him deliver at a high level in Atlanta as Cincinnati struggled to keep the lid on things on defense. Similarly, the decision to let defensive tackle DJ Reader walk prior to the 2024 season also did backfire, acting as another contributing factor to the disastrous defensive output in 2024 that ultimately cost the team a shot to the playoffs. For the sake of Cincinnati Bengals fans, hopefully their front office has learned that they are in a win now situation and that if they want to win now, they have to start paying these guys right now and not just let them walk in free agency. Giving Joe Burrow the best possible chance to win a Super Bowl while he is performing at the peak of his powers has to be the priority, meaning Cincinnati needs to do whatever they can to lock up Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson on new deals. They, along with Joe Burrow, form the core of the team that must stick around to maintain the Bengals' status as a powerhouse in the AFC. And don't get me wrong, that is a lot of money to give to not a lot of people, and it will mean that Cincinnati will have to be savvy with how they manage the rest of their salary cap. But paying stars, cutting dead weight, finding cheap free agents, and landing gems in the draft, it's not going to be easy, but it is the blueprint that has helped teams like the Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs win Super Bowls in recent years, and teams like Washington and Detroit execute rapid rebuilds like we've seen recently. Thankfully for the Bengals, though, we are approaching a 2025 draft class that is loaded with talent on the defensive side of the ball, so there definitely should be a starting defensive line talent available to the Bengals on day 2 of the draft, allowing them to hone in on any of the Will Johnsons, Jade Barron, Siobhan Revell, or Malachi Starks to solidify the secondary in round 1. Alternatively, the question marks surrounding the interior of the offensive line heading into 2025 could encourage the team to look in the direction of guard Tyler Booker in round 1, alongside several other intriguing offensive line names that could either work at guard or tackle positions. And that's the key too. If you're going to pay your stars, then you're going to have to hit on some draft picks in the draft, which, again, luckily for the Bengals, it's pretty stacked this year, so I definitely could see them hitting on some good draft picks. Just back in 2022, ahead of the season's playoffs, Joe Burrow told reporters that the Cincinnati Bengals Super Bowl window was his whole career. While he might have a point in saying that, nothing can be taken for granted, and the one thing we know for sure is that Joe Burrow is undeniably playing at the peak of his powers right now. If they just had a league average defense in 2024, it's hard to imagine him not having a part to play in the playoffs, and we already know that he is one of the few quarterbacks to have success in the postseason against Patrick Mahomes. So even if you do believe that the Cincinnati Bengals Super Bowl window is Joe Burrow's entire career, it would be negligent to not try to capitalize on the elite play that he is delivering right now. And for that reason, the 2025 offseason for the Bengals will be crucial, and is one where the Bengals need to make every decision with a win now mindset. Building a Super Bowl caliber roster isn't easy, but the Bengals can at least put themselves on the right footing by signing all of Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson, and hoping that they can hit on enough draft and free agent signings to put them over the edge. Joe Burrow has even hinted that he would be looking at a contract restructuring to make that a possibility. So, there definitely is a chance.